there's one last loop I want to talk about, okay? And that's the for each loop. So this is a regular for loop that we've been seeing all the way through. You can use it pretty much with anything. There are cool loops called for each loops or the enhanced for loop. What does that do? Well, and when do we use it? We can use it when we have lists specifically. And it allows you to traverse through the list. So this, which is running through names, is the same as saying for each string, if we're pretending that this, I should have been clear about this. This here is an array of strings called names. Okay? It doesn't really matter what it is filled to. We can assume that it is filled. It doesn't matter what it's filled to because we're going to use names.length. If you want to traverse through the loop, like to print it out, for example, you can say for each, this is how we read it, for each string, str, now this is basically a temporary variable that holds each element. In names, system.out.println string. So this, if names were these, let's say we had two. Names at 0, names at 1. Let's say this was Billy and this was Isabel. str refers to the first time through. Names at 0. Names at 1 refers to str the second time through the loop. I'm sorry about this. This slide, when I pulled it into Notability, formatted differently. So, this, I'm gonna, as I say these things, I'll highlight them and highlight it above here. On the slide that's connected to your homework, it should be formatted correctly. So, the type, first in the for comes, the for each loop comes the for, and we say for each type of object the array holds, string, and then we'll call that the temporary variable, the name of the variable the objects will be stored in this case str. So for each string, and then the name of the list we're traversing comes next. For each string str in names, and then this again we use inside of the loop as each element, to call for each element. Okay, this is very important. I'm going to tell you right now it's on the AP, and I'm also going to put it on a test, on your next test. So this is something you really want to pay attention to. This part here where we talk about pass by copy. All right, you do not want to use a for each loop if you need to know the indices, or if you want to change the values of the elements. That's really important. Unless you have an array of objects and you use mutator methods. If you have an array of objects and you use mutator methods, because we have references, they behave differently. Okay? This is a pass by copy. This is a pass by copy issue. So str here is taking a copy of what is inside the actual array. So I wrote Billy and Isabel, but we know that these are references. So these are references. This is going to be a reference, okay? If it's an int, it's going to be a copy of whatever that int is. It will not be the actual int. So if I try and say, like, plus plus to an integer value, it will, when the array is done with the method, unless something is saved to it, it will not actually save there because it was just passed in as a copy. Okay? So, what does this loop do? So, we're talking about our classroom, right? Our array of students, okay? For each student, stud, in kids, if stud.getGPA is greater than 3.5, count plus plus. What does this loop do? Well, It goes through everybody in classroom and it counts, or every student, I should say, in kids, and it counts the number of students in kids with a GPA higher than 3.5. Okay, this is something that you can totally use this for. You are just counting here. We're not trying to change anything in the array. We're using the information in the array to count for us. Okay. The last couple things, arrays can be passed in as parameters. Okay, when it's passed into a method and the values of its elements are changed within that array, the original array that was passed is also now changed. Why? Because it's a pass by reference. Okay? Unless you use a for each loop, which I just told you not to do. Okay? It's a pass by reference, not the actual array. Okay? And so the reference is passed in, the reference is copied. That's as opposed to when we say the actual elements, which are primitives. If we have primitives and they're passed by copy, they won't be changed. If they're references and they're passed by copy, and we use some sort of mutator method on them, they will be changed. Okay? What does that look like? Public void array method. And then we'll say, this should have actually been a little a. Int little and an array a. Okay? An integer. We're expecting an integer of arrays. An array of integers of some sort. The size isn't specified here because you don't need the size. It's very generalized. We'll just use a.length to find whatever the size is. Okay? We aren't ever going to put the length in here. We're just going to assume that the array has been created and can be passed in. And we're just going to use .length to help us here. We can also return arrays from methods. Okay? This allows us to return more than one value because, you know, they all have to be the same value. So they all have to be ints or they all have to be doubles because they're all held in this list. But it allows us to return more than one thing at once, which is cool. In the method declaration, this return type here, it's int with the square braces. Okay, and this should have also been a little a. And this one is not taking a parameter. So you could do both. You could take in an array and you could also return an array. Okay, the name and the size do not need to be specified. We actually don't want to we don't want to specify them because we want to have the ability to make our programming more flexible. If we leave them general, as in here and here, any size of array can go in, any size of array can come out. Okay, the size will be specified after, like, the size will be specified somewhere else. So in this case, it would be before we put it in as a parameter. And in this case, it might be like inside a, as an instance variable. And that's it. So our code gets super exciting because we can do things like make lists and sort through things and figure out a bunch of different, like we could figure out our class average. We could sort the list so that they're all sorted by their first name or they're all sorted by their student ID. So lists of similar material makes it just makes our coding a lot more interesting.